Welcome to Curious and Candid, conversations with those in pursuit of more. Today's guest is Zach Evanesh. Zach, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Quinton. Great to be here, my man, on your third podcast. Very impressive. Made me already think, should I shut mine down and move on?
Well, I'm kind of a free spirit and I'm all over the place sometimes. So maybe that's the reason for the third podcast. But
Great.
Excited to have you on. We're going to kind of walk our way through some conversational starter questions I like to ask all the guests just to kind of get the conversational ball rolling, so to speak, Zach. So I would like to know, how do you start your day? Is there any specific routine or ritual you like to stick to on most mornings, on most days?
Yes. Very regimented, slightly by choice and slightly by force of nature. So I'm married with 2 kids. We've got 2 dogs in the house. And so if I don't wake up early, I don't get my writing in. I don't get my morning newsletter out. So I wake up at 5 a.m. During the summertime because I'm also a strength coach at a high school. So I get there for 7. I leave at 6:20. During the school year, I could wake up a little later, so it might be 5:30. But I usually have an hour to myself. So I make a cup of tea in the morning, come downstairs, and I begin writing. So I have a newsletter that I must have been writing to newsletter subscribers, since close to 20 years ago. So 2003, maybe. I may have gotten like my first software for newsletters. And I hate saying newsletter. It's so impersonal because when I'm writing, I feel like I'm writing to one of my bros, one of my friends. So I come downstairs, sit down here in my office, and I start writing. And part of it is, from the heart. And other times I've maybe got a plan going on. Hey, I'm focusing on really, I released a new book a week ago. So I'm really encouraging my readers to pick up that book because the feedback is all about the inspiration and life-changing behind it. Sometimes I'll do some training in the morning. I don't want to say training, but a warm-up for the day. So last November, December, I did the 30-30-30 challenge. So it was 30 push-ups, 30 Hindu squats, 30 days in a row. Other times I might just want to stretch a little bit. Or I might do 15 reps of several exercises like V-ups, push-ups, bodyweight squats. But lately it's just have a cup of tea, come downstairs, start writing. And then during the summer, I'm coaching Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that's when my routine gets a little bit changed, because normally after I write, make breakfast for my kids, get them to school, I go to my own gym down the street and I train. Because I go to my high school around 10:15, 10:30. So I get to train. Monday through Friday is my training schedule 10 months out of the year. In the summertime, I'll train probably 3 to 4 times a week. And then I'll go after, my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday coaching. I'll go afterwards. But for the most part, it's tea, writing, and training. And then it's okay, now I could get on with the meat and potatoes of the day. And really training for me is for, of course, physical health, but emotionally, psychologically, what it does for me, it kind of calms me down. It sets the tone for the day. If I don't train, I'm just not in the best of spirits. So 4th of July, we were having family coming over. My wife knew before I started grilling and shopping, he has to go train. That's the way to other people might drink or smoke pot or whatever they want to do. I need to squat and deadlift and flip tires and do push-ups. And then it's nice and calm.
Cool. Love that, Zach. Now we're going to talk about your book that you mentioned that you just came out with recently here in a moment. But do you have an all-time favorite book or a book that you like to gift often? If you want to answer both those questions, that's great. And then what's a go-to podcast or your favorite podcast? We're going to talk about your podcast as well, but outside of yours, what do you like for a podcast currently?
Yeah. So I'm probably listening to podcasts more than I'm reading. I used to read every night, was 2 pages before I went That was my rule. You got to read 2 pages before you go to bed. I'd say in the business world, I have a few. It's hard to stick to one, but one that stays on or near my desk at all times is Stephen Pressfield's Turning Pro, which I also gift it quite often at seminars when I'm doing my certification. I've done the Strong Life seminar, Strong Life Experience. I will gift Stephen's book, Turning Pro. Simply keeping the kind of book and reading the cover is a reminder of, oh, are you working like a pro, or are you doing fake work, busy work, where you're like scrolling and looking at stuff, you're consuming but not producing? So that is one of my favorites. One of my favorites that really gave me the mindset in business is from Dan Kennedy, who was one of kind of like the early guys in copywriting and business education. He has a series of books called No BS. And then there's like a different title to each No BS. But my favorites are No BS Wealth Attraction and No BS Time Management. And you could buy those books in like a Kinko's, a Staples. You could buy it on Amazon for $3. But the mindset shift that I acquired from reading his books over and over again have just really they've been kind of the framework to my business, especially as a busy guy. So those 3 books in the business world. And then when it comes to training, the book that really changed my life were Arnold Schwarzenegger's 2 books, his encyclopedia, which is massive. I think it's like 500 plus pages, which we actually purchased when I was in Israel as a kid. My grandfather bought it for my brother and I was pretty young. I may not have even been in middle school when we got it. And then when I got to high school, I read his autobiography, which is called The Education of a Bodybuilder. I read that book 3 years in a row. I didn't let any other kids take it out of the high school library. So during this recent documentary, everybody's like, you got to see it. As soon as I saw the first 5 minutes, I was like, oh, I already know this, because I've memorized his book and life story. So Education of a Bodybuilder, Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding. So Arnold, Dan Kennedy, Stephen Pressfield, those books are tremendous to me.
Cool.
Oh, podcast, right?
Yeah, podcast. What are you listening to lately?
I'll tell you what's on right now. Coming here,
Perfect.
I was listening to My First Million. I like those guys. That's a great podcast. Couple of my friends, Mark Smelly Bell, who's got the Power Project. Joe DeSena had Spartan Up, but now he changed it to the hard way. These guys are real interesting. They do a daily short podcast, Marketing School. It's Eric, Sue, and Neil Patel. 5 minutes, 7 minutes. But My First Million has been very inspiring. And one more that I've really enjoyed. It's a new one. It's called Voodoo Power, and it's on strength and conditioning. So I was just on this podcast yesterday. Steve, he's a strength coach, but he owns a farm, or he works on a farm, and he always wanted to be a cowboy. So when I'm watching him train athletes, there's horses in the background, like kids are sprinting and lifting, and there's horses. And his podcast is really cool. But in business, My First Million is really inspiring me, because here I am, 21 years online, and there's people, they're talking about like 1-person operation making $100,000 a month. It just kind of reminds me and teaches me like, wow, like everybody is so capable. You just got to keep finding a way. And I think that's why I've never given up, because I'm a believer in the entrepreneurial life, that there is a way. Maybe my way is taking quite a bit longer than somebody's others, but I'm going to keep going until I'm really impacting much more people than I am now. I always wanted to impact 1 million people, changing lives of 1 million people.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the Strong Life podcast. You have over 300 episodes. I think you're going on to 400.
Close, yeah.
When did you start that podcast? Why did you start it? And what have you learned since you've kind of stepped in the world of podcasting and, sharing kind of like your experiences, your expertise, but also having conversations with other experts in the field? What have you kind of learned through the podcasting medium, so to speak, Zach?
So the podcast is, I think, 10 years old now. I may have started it in 2013. And when I started, software and technology were very limited. So I was using Skype. I was actually using a different software called Ecamm. And I was really struggling with recording and then getting audio. And I didn't know how to even get the audio up. So the podcast technically started as like a video podcast. And in that 2013 or 2012 time slot, I was on the Barbell Shrugged podcast. And those guys invited me out to Miami for, man, I'm forgetting what that big CrossFit, Wadapalooza. And so they bring me out and they rent this big mansion and they have guests sleeping there who are going to be speakers at the tent that they were kind of renting out at Wadapalooza. So I was one of the speakers. So they were interviewing all kinds of people. They were the first guys to video it and really make it kind of creative. Everybody's standing, nobody's sitting, moving around. And so after those guys kind of brought me into their world, I realized, I got to think bigger, go bigger. So my first few episodes were just on YouTube. I didn't even have a title in the beginning. I didn't know what it was. So I believe my first guest was either Martin Rooney or Eric Cressy. They were 1 and 2. And I remember Martin Rooney and I were talking. He's like, this podcast should be called Training for Life. And it very well could have been. And so, through the decade plus of doing that podcast, as well as at one point before COVID, Joe DeSena with Spartan Up kind of created, Spartan Up was like an umbrella podcast. And then they created sub podcasts with trying to put out daily content. So mine was called Spartan Way, where I would share lessons from the world of being in Spartan. So it was about training, fitness, life, business. I would share excerpts from a book. I would share a book title, a book excerpt, a experience I had, and then I would share something on average 5 minutes. So being in the podcast world, what I've learned is there are no rules. You got marketing school going every day for 3 to 7 minutes. You have Joe, who was at Spartan Up. Now they changed it to the hard way, kind of like you've had 3 different episodes. So the big lesson I have picked up from interviewing guests and working with Joe and just listening to podcasts is very much what you're doing. Be ready and willing to pivot versus saying, I'm quitting, I give up. We don't need to quit. Maybe we've done something that didn't work to our liking or didn't have the impact we thought it would. And so, okay, I'm going to pivot. And that's been my biggest lesson in all of this. And then, of course, I'd say a neck to neck with that is anybody who was ultra successful being interviewed on these podcasts, whether it's impacting a lot of people, making a lot of money, writing a lot of books, is their grit, their perseverance, their refusal to give up. Steven Pressfield, I don't think, really published his first book. He may have been late 40s, early 50s. And Steve just did a Instagram on it in relation to his book. And he said he, was picking up always odd jobs because that was like his safety net to never finish the book. He would always get right an inch from the finish line. And working one of the odd jobs, they called it, you're pulling the pin. He worked for it was either a trucking company. And the way they paralleled pulling the pin is if you were the train conductor and you wanted the train to come apart, you had to go and pull the pin to separate the train pieces. So he said at this one job, it was like, all right, he was with this guy called John from Seattle. I didn't have a last name. And John from Seattle said, listen, we got to do this together and don't let one another pull the pin. So let's say, a week in, they're like, hey, where's Joey Smith? He pulled the pin. So there was a lot of people quitting. And it's cool to just listen to the parallels of things. And so now it's not so much, hey, do I quit? It's, we're not quitting. We're going to pivot. We're going to find a way to do this. And I got to tell you, this recent book I published, I started writing it during COVID, and I was pulling the pin on 100 different things. The book was done, but I was like, oh, getting it on Amazon. Oh, my editor wants me to change this again. And I was so ready to just be like, F this thing. I'll just make it an ebook. And I've been there before. And then when you complete it, you're like, that wasn't actually that hard. It was all fabricated in my mind.
Yeah. Love it. Love it, Zach. Okay. What life lesson have you been taught or have you learned within the last year or recent times?
I'm going to piggyback on that one that I just mentioned, don't pull the pin and pivot. And I could take that way back to, I shared this story when I was a freshman in high school on the wrestling team. I was a first-year wrestler, and the majority of my teammates started wrestling in 6th grade, 3rd grade, 1st grade. So they either had 3, 6, or like 8 years of experience, where I had 0 experience. Well, I got my butt kicked all year. And then finally, the last week of practice, I start beating some of the guys. I'm taking them down. I'm escaping. I'm winning our practice matches. And finally, in between one of the matches, I sit down and this one kid says, he's like, man, you're killing it. This is great. He's like, we were all betting on when you were going to quit. So I guess they were betting on like, Zach's going to quit this week. Oh, no, next week. And when he said it to me, I was very young. In high school, I turned 14 December of freshman year. So this is like February. And I remember when he said that, the thought through my mind was, I didn't even know quitting was allowed. I honestly thought we sign up, we finish. And I've seen this shift in the world today. Like, I work in a high school, and the past few years I've seen student teachers, and they're gone every other day. They don't feel good. They don't come in. They're on their phone. They're kind of disheveled looking. They don't wear, a collared shirt. They don't look like a pro. The book Turning Pro. Even if you're not a pro yet, let's be a pro let's dress the part as if we already are. And so I remember thinking of student teaching. Oh, I didn't know I could even call out sick. I thought, like, I'm showing up unless blood is shooting out of my ears. But every teacher I worked with, like, pushed me. My whole day Sunday was spent like writing lesson plans, and I didn't know I could do a shitty job. I didn't know that was allowed. I didn't know I could disappear every other day or opt out of actually teaching. And so, again, quitting has very negative connotation. So pivot, but, quitting also, where's the grit? Where's the perseverance? That is an absolute necessity if you want to be successful in anything, including relationships, parenting. Like, I've been doing strength and conditioning for so long, but every day I'm learning to even communicate better with the athletes I work with, because I'm learning to pivot. They respond differently than athletes responded 5 years ago, certainly 10 to 20 years ago. So you got to pivot and find a way to get better and make forward progress. So today's Thursday. Tomorrow, I will be better than I am today. Who I am tomorrow is not who I am today. And I teach those lessons, especially to the incoming freshmen, because you could have incoming freshmen that weigh 105 pounds, 120 pounds. By the time their senior year comes around, they could gain 40 to 80 pounds. If they gain 40 pounds, that's not even 1 pound a month in 4 years. That's not that 1 pound a month. It sounds so little, but then when you see a kid who's graduating 100 pounds heavier, it shows you the power of commitment, consistency. So these are kind of lessons I've probably always, quote unquote, known, but now I'm getting this real deeper connection to them.
Cool. Love it. Okay. Last one in terms of the conversational starter questions, then we're going to dive into your backstory, Zach. do you have a favorite quote, mantra, or word? If there's more than one, feel free to share.
Yes. Favorite quote is something I saw when I started training at Diamond Gym, which was a bodybuilding gym in New Jersey. That reminds me of like West Side Barbell of the bodybuilding world. So for those listening that aren't into all that stuff, it was a very intense place with loud music. Photos surrounded the entire wall of every bodybuilder from Diamond Gym. You just were you wanted to get up on that wall, and the owner kind of had no rules because he wanted it to be like a Wild West saloon where the cowboys parked their horses. So these guys would park motorcycles on the front porch. He wouldn't say, don't drop weights, don't do this. He let it be free. But there was a poem in front of the squat rack next to an old black and white photo of Tom Platz squatting in college with a bar that was bending and his legs looked like tree trunks. And the poem said, there are those that do and those that don't, those that will and those that won't. And those two photos were staring you in the face every time you got under the squat bar. And it's like you were thinking you're going to do 3, and then you looked at that poem and you're doing 5 or 6, or you think you're doing 10 and now you're doing 15. And it's amazing how those words changed my life. And so I first went to that gym in, I think, November or December of 1993. So you and I are having this conversation in the summer of 2023. That's 30 years ago, but I still remember those words. And it goes to show you, like, it's amazing what the power of words can do for somebody, or even a photo. You know, I could look at a photo and it can elicit, like, I could imagine the story behind it. So for the creatives listening, I guess my message to them with that is, like, put your work out there, because your work can change somebody's life. And, you know, not everybody's going to love it. Certainly, probably not everybody loved Diamond Gym, but I did. And that photo of that poem was, man, it still fires me up.
Yeah, I can tell. That's great. Okay, Zach, now I want to kind of take a deep dive into your backstory. So talk to us about, like, where you grew up and what the younger years were like for you. I know you played sports and were very active and things like that, but why don't you kind of just hit on some of the highlights in terms of your childhood, if you don't mind, please.
Right. So I'm 47. So I was born in 75 and was born in Israel. And my family moved to America when I was 11 months old. We moved to the Bronx. And I think I may have been 4 or 5 when we moved to New Jersey. And I think 4, because I remember we lived in a apartment complex. And then my parents bought a house from a friend of theirs who was moving somewhere else in New Jersey. And I got to grow up in this neighborhood packed with a bunch of kids my age or 2 years older. So I have an older brother, 2 years older, and a younger brother. And so by the time we moved to this town, Edison, New Jersey, central New Jersey, we were outside. It was like a electric neighborhood where you're playing basketball, street hockey, manhunt, bike tag, BMX biking. If it's raining, we're fixing our bikes. And so I grew up in the 80s in that BMX skateboard scene, spending your days outside, not allowed to come home except for dinner and then at 10 p.m. at night. And my dad, coming from Romania and Israel, wasn't really familiar with football, baseball. So my dad got me into soccer. And I was not great, but I was pretty good at it. But in 8th grade, my brother was a sophomore and my brother joined wrestling. And he comes home from practice one day so hyped up saying, I just joined the best sport in the world. He says, the best sport in the world. It's like, this sport is called wrestling, and you have to, like, beat the other guy up, and you have to, like, you know, get a hold of his legs and take him down. And he was practicing stuff on me in the living room or downstairs, like wrestling on the carpet. And so my older brother was into the training, the working out before I was. Yet what's strange is once I got into sixth grade, I'd be in his room and I would read the bodybuilding books and magazines that he had, but I was never like actually doing the thing. He had weights in the room and I would try to like follow something from a magazine or Arnold's book, and I would do it for one day or 1 week and then I would stop. And I remember saying to myself, like, what's wrong? What is something wrong with me? Like, why can't I just stick to this? So the end of eighth grade, about 2 weeks before eighth grade ended, like early June, I go into my brother's room again and I open Arnold's encyclopedia, and he has this beginner strength training, beginner bodybuilding program. And I just start copying it. And I use the weights that we had, like skinny barbells with the spin collars, and I had to like lift the bar to get it on my back. And I just started, I don't know how, but finally it clicked. I fell in love with it. And then a kid, a couple houses up the street, his name was Matt, about 3 or 4 houses away. He also had weights in his basement. Then him and I started training together, and everything was a competition. You do 10, I'll do 11. If you did 75 pounds, I'll do 80 pounds. And him and I would train Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'd be out running. And as soon as my brother mentioned wrestling and said, this is the sport you got to do, I began training. I thought that was normal activity, running a lot, bodybuilding workouts 3 days a week. And part of me was like, I have to prepare for this sport. And so what's so strange is, I'm at a high school, so I'm seeing 150, 200 athletes a day. Freshman football started training with me 3 weeks ago. 25 to 35% could not do one push-up. And I said to them, guys, when I was a kid, as soon as I knew I was training for a high school sport, I was doing push-ups all day. I'd wake up, roll out of bed, push-ups. And I would do push-ups throughout my day, maxing out, trying to, 20 in a row, 25 in a row. Can I get to 35 in a row? And I said, guys, you signed up for a sport where somebody's trying to take your head off, smash your face in. How have you not considered doing push-ups? And now that's my job, is getting these kids strong. And I'm still using a lot of these old books that I learned from. And so in high school, I trained, I give the short version. I trained the wrong way. A lot of bodybuilding, kind of like squeezing, pump up lighter weights, no powerlifting work, no mentors really. And so by training the wrong way, it was like, I was the horse going this way, but the carriage was, going the other way. And I lost a lot. I got a lot of injuries to my knees, my shoulders. And then until finally in my mid-20s, while training in the early years of shoot fighting, which was like the precursor to MMA, which the place that I trained at was called No Holds Barred Fighting, NHB, I tore my ACL. And so from age 13 to like age 26, 27, I'm training bodybuilding. I get into my early 20s. I learn about power bodybuilding by reading about Dave Draper, who talks about doing like cheat curls with 185 pounds and squatting heavy and dumbbell benching 150s. And I started putting a premium on strength. And I started getting like that thicker golden era bodybuilding look. But the training I did, the running, 6 to 10 miles every other day, just destroying my body, it really beat up my joints until finally I tore my ACL. When I tore my ACL, I was a fifth-year teacher, so I would have been around 27. That's what put me over the edge to research strength and conditioning for wrestlers and for athletes, because I was mad and confused as to how somebody who could bench 315, squat 500 plus, tore his shoulder, tore his knee, a broken nose I had, but that doesn't really mean you're not strong. But I had enough injuries that like it set me over, it like put me over the edge to research. And I've never stopped. And that would have been kind of around 2002, because before that happened, here's what happened. I'm going to back up a second. The year before that happened, I was going through my master's degree for health education. And with the drive, an hour each way, and all the papers and research I had to do, I couldn't train at Diamond Gym anymore, which was 25 to 30 minutes away. One day I hit traffic going to Diamond Gym, and I couldn't even get to the gym. And then I had to get off the parkway, turn around. And I think I was in my car for like 2+ hours and didn't get to train. And that's when I started buying used gym equipment, putting it in the garage. You know, I lived with my parents, and I was buying it off newspaper classified ads. So back then, Quinton, before the injury, I was looking at the personal training business to do something on the side because I was a teacher. But after the ACL tear, I was like, I'm going to do strength and conditioning. And, you know, that's where I came up with, I would always say I'm a strength and performance coach, because I always felt like strength and conditioning meant strength, condition, nothing else. And so, you know, a lot of my decisions and the path I've taken was kind of dictated through the pain I experienced that inspired me to move into a certain area.
Okay, now I just want to take a quick step back before we move forward, Zach. Now, in terms of, because you got into education in terms of like being a teacher yourself, right? In terms of academics in school, did you enjoy academics in school when you're younger? Or is that something that you've obtained over the years once you moved into areas maybe that you were interested in studying as opposed to being forced to study or learn something?
Yeah, what's funny is in high school, I was a good student, but I struggled with exams. And so when I was moved my senior year into honors English, I failed first marking period. And so I posted that on Twitter. I said, you know, what's funny is like I've written a lot of books, yet I failed my first marking period of high school English. And then my English teacher, she got hurt. She hurt her back. So they brought in a permanent sub. And that permanent sub helped me apply to college. And she helped me write my essay, my creative, I had to learn creative writing. And I wrote a story about like I was getting fast food from McDonald's in Edison, which was like a big hangout where athletes would go after football games. And, you know, I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of it, but basically a guy tried to go through the drive-through on foot. He couldn't get in. He knocks on the back window of my Mazda. I turn around, I see nobody. And then his head is like in the car. He's like, hey, man, they won't let me go through this. Do you mind if I get in? He gets in, and he's kind of like a wackadoo. And he's, you know, we're talking about life and the military, and my brother's in the Israeli army. He's like, I used to be a Marine, and I could kill people with my own 2 hands. So I wrote about how scared I was in the car and that I might have to fight this guy and use my wrestling. And my teacher was like, this story is amazing. I felt like I was in the car with you. She's like, I was so nervous reading it. And that's when I learned, like, I kind of like writing. And so I get into a local college, and one of the first classes freshman year was creative writing. So creative writing, we had to write stories, and I wrote about my first wrestling match that I won. And the teacher asks me to read the story. And he's like, can't you just feel it? He's like, I felt like I was there. He's talking about pinning him. He's looking at the guy's shoulders going down inch by inch. He's breathing heavy. I felt like I was there, you know? And I didn't know that I had some knack for writing. But what I really think it was, Quinton, was passion, because the books I read in high school were Arnold's bodybuilding books. And when I read his books, I imagined like I was going through life with him. I was imagining all of those things. And so when I wrote, I just thought that people should imagine they're with me. And never did I think I'm going to be a strength coach. And, you know, now where education is really, it's not something that I encourage people to go into. It's not in a good place. It's kind of heartbreaking, you know, and unfortunate. But when I got into it, I started teaching in 98, the spring of 98. So that was a long time ago. Back then, people were like, hey, you're a teacher. That's going to be a great job. You're going to work in Edison. You can make over $100,000. Oh my God, $100,000. And my grades outside of anything fitness wise was a struggle. I was just struggling. But when I was in college and I'm studying anatomy and physiology and kinesiology, I was like, oh, I love this stuff. And what's crazy is it was really, you didn't learn that much back then because there wasn't a lot of interactive stuff like today. If you wanted to intern, they didn't have exercise science. They didn't have internships with a strength and conditioning coach. You worked in a hospital cardiac rehab with like 80-year-olds who are coming out of, a heart attack or a stroke. So it's not like you're in this exciting environment. And, it happened for me when I couldn't get to Diamond Gym. I said, I'm just going to buy stuff. And I was buying equipment from the newspaper. So there was no eBay. I was looking the newspaper and I'd call people up. You don't know what it looks like. You're showing up hoping it's good. And so I remember buying my first used equipment. I went to Newark, which is like a crime capital of New Jersey. And so I was like, all right, I put a little money in my pocket, a little in my sock, a little in my underwear. That way, if somebody tries to mug me, they're not getting all the money. They're getting 1/3 the money. So I still remember that day of going in and just being like, I don't even know if I'm going to buy the equipment, but there's a chance somebody will mug me.
Yeah. Now the question is, did you end up buying that equipment or was it a no-go?
Yeah, I purchased, somebody must have had like a fitness studio, like a personal training studio. I purchased a pair of 50 and 100-pound dumbbells, a flat utility bench. So when I used that flat utility bench to incline it, I put like a heavy duty toolbox under it. I bought a dip bar, and I think from this person, maybe it was another person, you're a bit younger than me, but there's a guy out in Ohio who was making equipment in the 90s. I'm not sure if he still makes equipment, but he had supplements called, his name's John Perillo Performance. He created benches that had an arch. They were not straight. And so I bought an arched Perillo Performance bench. And I think I sold it, a year later in the early days of, I don't know if it was eBay. I don't think Craigslist was out. There was, the internet was starting to create forums where you could sell stuff. Of course, now I regret it because that's a hot item to come across. So that's how I started, with a pair of 50 and 100s, utility bench, dip bar, and then I bought a squat stand from a website called New York Barbells, not York Barbell, New York Barbells. And it was called a gun rack because all it was upright stands. And I remember the price was very weird. It was like $112.50, some very weird number. And I bought a 300-pound weight set from Costco. At the time, it may have been called Price Club. $99, 300-pound weight set. And that was the beginning of the Underground Strength Gym before I even called it the Underground Strength Gym.
Okay, now before we get into underground strength and performance and conditioning and all that, Zach, talk to me a little bit about getting into education and being a teacher, because I'm a K through 12 licensed educator myself, own a gym currently, getting back into education later this year, have a huge passion for the next generation. So what kind of inspired or encouraged you to step into education to help train or raise up the next generation in terms of classroom work? And then we'll kind of get into the training or conditioning part in a minute.
Yeah, so interesting that you're going to get back into education, because I've been in and out. So for me, that was the only area I could really get into that fell under the umbrella of fitness and exercise. Like, how would I be able to be in the weight room, in the gym? Because even through high school, I would have my dad drive me to other gyms to look around and like I would interview the front desk manager. I would go to a Gold's Gym. How did you get this gym? How did you get the equipment? How much does it cost? How often are you here? How much money do you make? So I wanted to be involved in the world of exercise. I didn't really know. I hate to say I didn't know where the heck I was going with it all. But when I was student teaching, I had a tremendous experience at the elementary level and a horrible experience at the high school level. So I knew I did not want to go to a place where I hated showing up. And so I was at the elementary level from 98 until 2009, except for the 1 year I tore my ACL. I was at the middle school level because I was coaching wrestling. And so the principal at that school was like, when are you going to make the move to the middle school? We need you here. You're coaching here. So I made a move. And my principal at the elementary school said, you're making a big mistake and you shouldn't do it. And I was making such an impact at the elementary school. I really had, I think, too much self-belief, too much arrogance that I could change everything. And what was tough at the middle school was I was no longer alone, meaning you're student teaching, you're limited on equipment, you're I'm not student teaching, team teaching. You're kind of overloaded with students and under-equipped with enough equipment. And so it just promoted just kind of like a lot of apathy and behavior problems. And so here I am now at a high school. And what was weird is that in New Jersey, a full-time strength coach at the public school level is just not really a thing. There's, a handful of us in New Jersey. But the way for me to get into this job was you needed to have a health and phys ed certification. And so that's how I got into this high school. And ironically, the students at this high school are nothing like the kids I experienced in Edison. I mean, the kids are so nice and they just don't do bad things. I'm in a really good area. And so it's interesting how doing the same thing in a different place can be, sometimes you just need to be around better people, different environment. And so now, even though I do strength and conditioning, I use strength and conditioning as a vehicle to build the confidence of the kids, because I know that their time in sport is a small window. I think it's like 6 or 7% compete in college. So we're talking, if we want to be nice and say 10% compete in college, 9 out of 10 will not. But probably all of them will continue going to a gym. And so I always think, how cool is it going to be that these hundreds of kids, hundreds and hundreds that I train every year, when they're in their 20s and 30s and 40s, they're going to be that guy or girl in the gym front squatting, doing hang cleans, setting their shoulders right when they're benching, or doing shoulder health exercises. And it's like hill sprinting, even though hey, you're not supposed to do that. You're in your 40s. So I always say okay, at the football banquet, football might be over, but the hill sprints are never over. The hang cleans are never over. The deep squats never end. You do them for life. And that's, going back to you asking me about my morning ritual. Now you see why, training for me, and I think for a lot of people, it is the ultimate therapy. I think if we incorporated fitness into everyday school, we would see less depression, suicides, and any kind of, the, mental and emotional and psychological well-being versus illness. Movement is really the ultimate medicine. And so I could only imagine if even kids that have nothing to do with sports, teach them how to do dumbbell squats, dumbbell bench, get them a good arm pump, that would change their life. Joe DeSena and I always say we should open a school, and before you even enter the doors, 30 burpees before you get in. The only thing is, the Spartan school would attract Spartan elite type kids. I'm very much interested in working with the kids who are struggling, because I was one of those kids struggling. And a couple 6 weeks ago, when Sore Neck Summer Strong was middle of May, so almost 8 weeks ago, I squatted 405. I'm 47. I've had 4 knee surgeries. I think that's normal to be strong. And I want to share that with, like you said, this next generation. Like, my kids are in high school. I have a son who's going to be in high school in September. My daughter will be a junior. And of course, I'm saying they're great kids. I'm not saying they're perfect, but I believe that the fitness aspect in our household did something for their confidence, their ability to persevere. That doesn't mean they don't stumble and falter and have tough times, but I see the confidence, and I'm like, well, Ethan was climbing a rope at age 1.5 because it was in the garage. So was my daughter Summer. I was sprinting up and down the street and doing farmer walks. And so my kids would come out on the front lawn and take a gymnastics mat and try to imitate me doing push-ups. And I seen how exercise changed their life. Like, if my daughter's on the run around with school work, she's like, I got to go on a run. I could see that she's doing it for her mental health, not just physical. My son is now like a straight up meathead. He wants to go to the gym all the time. It's like really cool. And so, what else is heartbreaking, Quinton? I'm going to tell you something about why it hits me. When I started teaching in 98, and then I got hired at the elementary school, the school had a little over 300 kids. I still remember. And 2 of the kids were on the early days medication. I don't know. I can't remember what it was, for being ADD or ADHD. And what I learned was we kind of gamified it. If I had them in first grade. So of course, the new teacher, they're going to give the quote unquote bad kids. So it was Justin and Jonathan. Okay. So we got to this place where it was like, okay, if Mrs. Smith, I can't even remember their teacher's name. Can't remember it. But let's say Mrs. Smith says, you have a good day. You see me on Tuesday, but you had a great day Monday. You could eat lunch with me on Tuesday. So I never ate lunch in the teacher lounge because it was a lot of gossip. Yeah. So when these kids would eat lunch in the gym, I would eat my lunch. I would heat up my chicken and rice. They would scarf food down in like 90 seconds. And then I would let them take equipment out. Scooters, bowling pins, hockey sticks. And man, they would like go to town. They would smash into the bowling pins on the scooters. I would just let them. And what I learned is, oh, these kids just need another phys ed class. They need physical activity. Before you know it, 2 kids eating lunch with Mr. Evnesh is now 25 kids. It's like another phys ed class. They were so not interested in even finishing their meals. They just wanted to play more. And that's when I learned that the sitting and the lack of activity was going to be a problem. That's my first year. 2 kids on whatever the medication was. I can't even remember what it was back then. Then my 5th year teaching or 6th year teaching, the nurse had a line of like 30 kids deep, 32 kids deep, lined up for the new medication that came out. Whatever was being promoted to quote unquote calm your kid down. And I couldn't believe it. It was heartbreaking. Normally the nurse office was open during lunch in case a kid got hurt during recess. Then it had like a sign like, health office closed during yada yada time. And kids were lined up because their parents were putting them on these meds. And what's interesting is I'm training, I train, I've got my own gym since, 20 plus years. Well, a kid that I train, I was like, man, you lost a lot of weight. He's like, I know. He's like, my mom put me on this medication because the teacher said I can't sit still in class. And he's like, I have no appetite. I don't even want to eat. So some months later, he says to me, I just don't take it anymore. He's like, my mom gives it to me, but I just throw it out. And so, Kelly Starrett and his wife, I know I'm bouncing all around here, Quinton, on education, but years ago, they started standing desks. They did it as a pilot in their daughter's school. At the time, she was maybe 2nd grade. Well, I haven't seen standing desks in the high school I'm in. I personally, like right now I'm sitting, but behind my computer, I have like a filing cabinet where I prop it up and I usually work standing. I mean, it's not odd for me. Like I probably shouldn't, but a lot of times I'll just stand and eat. Like I like to just move. You know, I also understand to sit, calm down, but kids need to move. And I listen to the boys I train all the time. Like I know my son, he's not built for school. He should do like 2 hours in a class, 2.5 hours, then his other 2.5 hours trading stocks, go building, go work with a woodworker or a contractor. He needs that, as most boys do. You know, I live in a beach town. These kids should go and work at a surf shop, at a bike shop. Down here, you know, we have a lot of that. The sitting for 6.5, 7.5 hours a day is killing these kids. I mean, they look really, what I say is like boys have boobs and beer bellies and they're 13 or 15 from all the processed crap and the lack of activity. So me being on the ground floor, I'm 25 years in education now. I have seen the massive decline. And so that's why I really want to push the online business, because I could only impact so many in person. So that's a big brain dump. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Now, let's what from your perspective, Zach, being boots on the ground, how can we as adults, because it's our duty, I believe, to train up the next generation, whether that's physically, mentally, what have you, right? What solution or solutions do you think are possible for us to help our youth move more and get off the drugs and just be a little bit more present and you know, not just so, I don't know, addicted, I guess, to the drugs and the screens and all that. What solutions can we do specifically within like the public education realm? Because you know, that's kind of where I am at, and maybe others listening to this are going to be at.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is, Quinton, that the kids are pretty much going to spend half or more than half their day in school, right? So if you're in elementary school, you're there from 9 to 3:30. Then you get home around 4 till 10 p.m. You go to bed. So 6.5 hours in school, 6 hours at home. Well, you have the 1 hour before you wake up. So a little bit more time at home. Step one is really the parents can't rely on the schools. Public schools are really the antithesis to what it takes to be successful. And this is what I mean by that. To make a change requires all kinds of like administrative check marks, and there's too many administrators to even go through. They don't even like answer your emails. Number two, it has to get approved and voted on. And so now you're like 6 months into it. And in 6 months, you know, you could lose kids. But let's say I want to make a change at the underground strength gym. I'll do it right now.
Yeah.
I'll change right now, and I will experiment with it. And if it doesn't work, I'll pivot right then and there. And if it didn't work so hot at 4 p.m., I'll change it for 5 p.m. And then maybe I realize, oh, I could kind of do the same, but the personalities of 4 o'clock is different than 5 o'clock. So parents have to be the kind of change makers. So it has to start there. And then I'll get into the schools. The food in the house has to be as healthy and clean as, you know, minimal processed type crap in the house, because what we eat impacts brain chemistry. Okay. Number two, mom and dad could talk about exercise all day, but if you don't demonstrate healthy living, your son and daughter have zero reason to actually believe it's important. And so my kids see me. My wife runs all the time. We have like, there's weights in the house. There's a kettlebell in her office. There's a barbell, you know, with 10-pound plates there. It's in the house everywhere you go. Our garage has rings and kettlebells and a climbing rope. So mom and dad, how do you set the example? So those are two things, the eating, and parents must set the example. And now it's like a family thing. It's what we do. Schools, phys ed, it's probably never going to be an everyday thing. Okay. But it's got to get better. There are some great phys ed programs, but I said this, like I have one phys ed class and I tell them, I'm not walking with you guys. I don't have a master's degree and I will not accept a paycheck. And you guys get to go home and say, yeah, Coach Evnesh took us walking today. Okay. An inmate in, a dummy can take you walking. A dummy could take you don't need a teacher to walk with you. We're going to do physical activity. We're going to have options, games, things for you to do. Biking, running. You got to at least run one lap. You have to elevate the standard. The problem is the phys ed classes are too big. Then the teachers team teach. Now you don't have any equipment. And then it just promotes apathy. So the phys ed teachers need to raise the standard. Administration is too tied up with like bull crap. Like the lesson plans are so crazy, yet the teachers are not better from that. So schools need to stop bullshitting each other and high-fiving each other in an office that's separated from the school. Yes, this is the new style of lesson plans. It's going to be such a change. Bull crap. What do the kids really need? The kids need daily activity. If I was the principal of a school, and I'm sure this would be even a liability, we would start our morning with 10 jumping jacks, 10 squats. We would start the day with activity. But I remember was going to do Squat-tober in the school, and like the classes would do squats. And then the one administrator was like, you can't do that. The teacher is not, certified as a phys ed teacher. So if somebody gets hurt, they fall. And that's the truth. Somebody could do bodyweight squats and fall backwards and then split their head. And they'll be like, what was the history teacher doing squats for? And there you go. And so schools, public schools are really organized in such a way where the administration is lying to themselves about improving. It's just not a place where the kids are growing as much as they can. And so, I probably am best suited to be somewhere else. That's the heartbreaking thing. But I'll tell you, I'm in there as a strength coach. And I have one class which is going to eventually become a strength and conditioning or like an advanced fitness elective. And I came in that school's weight room it looked like a tornado. It looked like it was an outdoor weight room and a tornado hit. And just the struggle of upgrading and updating equipment has been like I'm asking for their firstborn child, when it really should be, hey, this is a massive liability. This dumbbell could break a kid's face if he's dumbbell benching or squatting. It'll fall on his foot. Replace them all. And so schools move too slow. If you want to win at life, you need to be an action taker, not reckless, but you got to start getting, like, you can't just, oh, I want to swim, but let me just stand right here on the edge of the lake. I'm not going to go in. Let me just watch everybody else go in. You got to start doing it. You got to start getting your knees into the water, mid-thigh into the water. Okay, I'm chest high. Let me learn to dog it. You have to make forward progress. Public schools are breaking my heart. That's the issue. And I got to tell you this, like, I'm okay with an administrator hearing me say this, because I'm Quinton, I'm 47. So when I'm doing things and I know I'm a thorn in somebody's side, all I say in my mind is, I don't care. I'm doing whatever it takes to better these kids. If you chose to be an administrator, I'm expecting you to move with me in these things that help the kids. And if you don't like it, fire me, because I'm doing what's best for the kids. I'm not doing what I want to do because I'm happy. I'm doing what's best for the kids. And I just don't think that's what's happening in schools. Certainly some public schools are better than others, and not every private school is great, but public schools need to evolve in a much better way.
Where did this passion, Zach, for helping young people and youth come from? Is this something that you feel like was innate from the time you were born, or was this something that you fostered or developed? Where did it come from? Because a lot of times you see adults, they're passionate about their own kids, but then, you know, kind of when their kids are done, they just retire and do their own thing. So where's the passion come from for our youth, for you?
Knowing what it did for me during tough times, you know, the emotional tough times, the physical tough times. Growing up in the 80s, there was no anti-bullying. You know, you could get beat up and nobody ever got in trouble. And so I saw what it did for me. Not that I'm some heroic, you know, superhero, but I feel great, man. I'm confident, I'm energetic. And it's all from exercise. It's all from strength training. It's all from building muscle and bodybuilding activities, and doing hard things. And if I didn't do those things, I would probably be a miserable, depressed, you know, I'd be a energy vampire. You wouldn't want to be around me. But I know what it does for people, and I want to share it. You know, I want to see other people happy, healthy, vibrant, excited, and exercise is like the magic pill.
Cool. Now let's go back. So we kind of lightly touched on when you started Underground Strength. You went and started getting you know, some equipment here and there. Walk us through the evolution of Underground Strength and kind of what it is at this point today, Zach.
Yep. So through the years, I had opened several warehouse gyms. At some points, I had more than one location. Unfortunately, probably one of our better locations, we shut it down during COVID. Not because COVID was stopping people from coming, but the business partner I had, as did the other programs, we were in a building with wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing. Our business partner was, you know, I don't know if the word is stealing money, but he was really fudging a lot of expenses where nobody was making money. He was like pushing all of the, you know, take your temperature, wear a mask, even when doors are open. People didn't want to come. So he really put us out of business. We were in a great location. So I've been in my current location for about 10.5 years. And afternoons and evenings, we open up to train athletes. In the summertime, we open in the mornings. And I've also basically whatever I do in the gym, I share it online. So I've created an online business that parallels what happens in the physical business inside the Underground Strength gym. And I'm still excited to just learn to be a better coach, whether it's the tactical, the technical, the art of coaching, the communication that Brett Bartholomew always talks about through his art of coaching information. So it's like crazy. I'm still excited to show up and coach. I was thinking that today. I was like, man, I'm like hyped up to coach. And I've been coaching. I actually started coaching freshman year in college. I began coaching the 6th grade wrestling team. So I was 17 years old as a freshman in college. And I don't know, like knowing it's when you could do it in a very crafty way that elicits great results, you're like, man, I want to help more people. I don't want it to be a secret. I want to help more people build a stronger world.
Yeah, for sure. Now, how did you kind of get into the online stuff? Because you were like an early adopter, so to speak, with all of that within strength and conditioning. How did that unfold, Zach?
So I just, when you ask me the questions, like I could go back, I laugh at how it started because, you know, I got lucky in those early days. You didn't have a million places to go for business or training information. So Ryan Lee, who is still teaching marketing and business, had he had membership websites. And he had a like CD of the month with a newsletter of the month, print newsletter. So I bought all of Ryan's business courses. I bought his first business course, and I just followed it. I would sat at my desk. I put the CDs in. It's like, okay, come up with a niche. Who do you love to train? Okay, here's where you go to build a website. Here's where you go buy it. Here's how you write, you know, the website up. So I would pause it and do it. I was a aggressive aggressive action taker. So Ryan Lee was my first mentor, always was, always will be. I love the guy. And my early days, like the software was so expensive. So if I wanted to create my first ebook, I went on eBay and purchased a bootleg version of Adobe PDF Maker, because if you wanted to buy the real thing, it was like 800 something dollars. So if I bought this bootleg thing for like 47 bucks, it was like you could make 5 PDFs with it. So I was like, oh man, I ain't got a lot of chances to do this PDF. So when I wrote that first ebook, Ryan Lee had it as part of his business program. It was like, all right, 10 chapters, outline the chapters. And I remember doing it, and like my wife's family was like, what is Zach doing? Like, he doesn't even really know how to work a computer. They're like, he's selling workouts online. That's so like dumb. So like, we always I always make fun of them. I'm like, when they're like, oh, we're so proud, I'm like, yeah, but remember when you guys were laughing at me? I always kind of rub it in their face. So that was the early days. And so I was building my websites, I guess about 20 years ago. And here we are, still persevering, not giving up, pivoting a little bit, like I'd say online, I'm now also focusing on middle-aged men, mid-30s, mid-40s. That's a real cool community to work with, because that's who I am. And I see a lot of middle-aged men just letting themselves go physically, which, as I keep harping, it destroys them mentally, psychologically. I mean, men look like shit nowadays. They really do. They look like hell. And it's like, dude, it ain't as complicated as the people want to make it. I'm a big fan of just the basics and getting great at them and falling in love with the simple style of training. So it's a passion of mine to have kind of like work with the youth and also work with men my age.
Yeah. What's next, Zach? We're going to touch on your book here in a quick minute, but in terms of the pivoting or the vision that you have for Underground Strength, the online stuff, what are you kind of moving toward currently?
So I really want the online program I have for the men. It's called Gladiator Strong. It's on Train Heroic. I want that to be 1,000+ members. I mean, I see people on Train Heroic with 3,000, 5,000. And I'm like, man, how do I only have like 100 people doing this? I got to get it out there. So I'm still pivoting and trying to learn how to impact more people, because I love the online, because my kids are getting older. All the sports stuff we travel for, I want freedom. I want the freedom to be able to operate my business from the phone. I don't know if the gym, let's say I shut down the gym, I think the gym would still be mine, because it would still be the lab where we film and train and invite people. But I've always spoken about having a piece of property with a barn, with a private gym where I'm not renting and paying somebody else's space. So that's a vision I still hold on to. And it's hard in my area finding land and property like that in my area of New Jersey. So those are two big areas. And now that I got this first book self-published, I'm like, okay, it wasn't like as complicated as I made it. I was pulling the pin before the finish line in every which way possible. And now I'm like, I could do this, I could do the next book and the next book. So it's cool. I got that out of the way, and I have a confidence that I was fabricating reasons why I couldn't get it done.
So talk about Iron Journeys. What is it all about? Why did you write it? Share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if you see the cover, well, actually, I know your podcast is audio, but for the people listening, when you go to Iron Journeys, you can find it on Amazon or ironjourneys.com. There's a kind of like, it's symbolic, the cover, where there's a young kid staring up at a gym wall, and the sign says Tough Gym. Well, Tough Jim is from Rocky 3 when Apollo has to take Rocky back to the old school to find himself and rebuild and gain that confidence. Well, on the cover, the little kid is looking up and he sees a shadow. And what he's doing is imagining who he can become. But the Tough Jim sign is symbolic of that. I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm not going to tell you it's a 30 days to this, 6 weeks to that. And listen, those 30 days and 6 weeks to this and that are starting points. I think a lot of people online sell it as like you will completely transform yourself. The true transformation is never ending. And so this book is for the young kid who needs to be inspired. This book is also for men of all ages, 20s, 30s, 60s, because it takes them back into like a time machine of when gyms were like these, man, it was like a house of iron where there was always like the strong guys who would mentor you and kind of created the rules of the gym. And you were the weaker, newer guy, and you wanted to earn somebody's respect. And then through the book, there's lessons such as, okay, I'm trying to earn this guy's respect, that guy's respect. But then one of the mentors teaches that the most important respect is self-respect, not what. So every chapter has training lessons, training methods, life lessons, and just it's helping you live the strong life, which is, dominate in the gym, in your health and fitness, and dominate in life with your relationships, your work. And the book is only like 96, 98 pages, but the original book is over 200 pages. But my friend, who's my editor, said, Zach, there's so much kind of overlap through these lessons. You need to break it up. So he's like, let's just pull 5 chapters. And then I think the next one will have the other 5 or 6 chapters. So this is kind of like Iron Journeys Part 1. And of course, I want people to just read 1 or 2 pages and do something. Now I'm going to do push-ups, or I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to buy an old barbell from the local flea market and put it in the basement and start working and start training. Or, there's a lot of, it says there's 5 powerful lessons. There's probably 5 to 10 lessons in every chapter. The reader gets to choose what their favorite lessons are. So my hope is that this book is like a turning pro for somebody else, that they can just keep it on the desk as a reminder of what to do.
Cool, man. I love that. Okay, we're going to start wrapping things up here, Zach. I want to ask you a few more things, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Joe DeSena, how did you get connected with him? What have you kind of learned from Joe?
Yeah, so when Joe wrote his first book, Spartan Up, he hired one of those companies that does outreach to, get them on the podcast. And I'm sure you've gotten those emails. They're very just like cut and paste. They're basically crap. It's like, is this a human writing it? So I got one of those emails from that marketing company, and I respond back saying, of course, I'll have Joe on the Strong Life podcast. Put me in touch with him. And I had known about Joe. I had heard about him very little on his website. And I don't even think they had the Spartan website. He had the Death Race website, because one of my old wrestling buddies did the Death Race. So on the Death Race website, there was like an old headshot of Joe when he did that race in Alaska, the Iditarod. And a year or 2 before I met him, I actually went to his farm in Vermont, hoping to meet Joe, but I was meeting Mark. Why am I forgetting Mark from Seal Fit? I don't know why I'm forgetting. Yeah, Mark Devine. I haven't spoken to Mark in a long time. So I was kind of going down the rabbit hole of learning from Navy SEALs. It wasn't the saturated market like it is now. And so I drove to Vermont because Mark was like, hey, I'll be on the East Coast helping Joe doing his first Spartan certification, Spartan trainer certification. I go to the farm. Joe is out doing work with people. I meet Mark at Joe's general store, and I don't get to meet Joe. But when I get that email I had already become friends with the guys at Barbell Shrugged. So I get Joe, he connects with me. I say, listen, I do the podcast with him. And I say, listen, if you want, I could help you launch your first book. I was like, but let me tell you something. That company that reached out to me, they stink. I told them, they stink. You're not going to get on any great podcasts. I go, let me put you in touch with the biggest podcasts. And I said, nobody knows anything about you, but people will buy from somebody that they know, like, and trust. So I said, what if I could get my friends out here to film a mini documentary on you? And I said, you're probably going to have to pay for them to fly out here and, put us in your ski cabin up here. So he's like, okay. So I reach out to my guys back. That was the original Barbell Shrugged crew before they were split up, before Chris Moore passed away. And they're like, so let me get this straight, Zach. This guy will pay for us to come, film a mini documentary, and we put him on our podcast. I was like, yes. I was like, we need to spend like 2.5 days with him and just film and make it like a story. So I had connected with some pretty big names like Lewis Howes, Tim Ferriss. I had helped Tim Ferriss with kettlebell training. I put him in touch with Tim Ferriss, with Lewis Howes. So I got Joe on the big podcasts. Then we did the video. Nobody had seen video of Joe. So it was like we recorded our conversations while climbing the mountain. We recorded the workout that Joe kicked our butt through in the morning. We did all this. And then Joe had his camera lady there, Marion, who would normally film the events. And then he's like, what's a podcast? He didn't even know. He's like, I want to start a podcast. They started filming. They created Spartan Up Podcast when I organized that. So as I'm helping Joe with connections and getting him on podcasts, he says to me, Zach, I have to pay you. Like, I got to pay you. How much does it cost for me to like pay you for all the consulting? I said, Joe, you ever have a friend that did friend stuff for you and never kept score and said, you owe me? I said, we're friends now and I'm just helping you out. I'm helping you get this book. And that's how we became good friends. That's how I earned his trust. I didn't ask for anything. Of course, I learned from being around him. You've asked me things I've learned. Like, Joe does not stop pushing and pivoting and creating. And if something like explodes in his business, I mean, I don't even know if he thinks about it for a millisecond. He's like moving on. If he's having a business phone call, it's like while we're climbing the mountain or while we're hiking up the road with a sandbag on his shoulder. It's just like a nonstop go. And 5 a.m., he starts the day with, 300 burpees or 10 exercises, 100 reps each. So when you go up there, it's not like you're having some calm time. As soon as you get out of your car, he's walking out the door and we're both climbing a mountain. The mountain is in his backyard. So I've learned so much from him. One thing I got to tell you that's so admirable is, man, he doesn't change from camera to off camera. He is Spartan through and through. His kids get off the bus, they're up the mountain. His kids he came down to my house because they were doing something in Philly. They were at a Spartan race. I'm about an hour from Philly. They come to the beach. My wife is like okay with cookies and things in the house. His kids, I don't think ever saw a cookie at this point. They were eating cookies. I saw the look on Joe's face. It was like somebody was stealing like his, his children or something. It was so funny. And, he's a Spartan through and through. He's waking up early. There's no, like, even when he's on vacation, he's training people. He also does this. He sucks you in. If you're on an email, there's 5 people on email, all of a sudden you're copied on a chain email. And it's always like, I'm looping in Zach. You don't even know what's going on, but he knows how to get people involved. You become like this willing volunteer. I think at Spartan races, and now he also owns Tough Mudder, it's all volunteers. Like, how do you get like 300 people volunteering. He's like, I get them to believe. He doesn't give you an out. It's so amazing and so inspiring. I mean, he is such an adventurous person. And yeah, man, it's just amazing to be around him. He's such a great friend.
Cool. Yeah. I had another gentleman on that's been has worked with Spartan, and so he was talking about Joe. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts that Joe's been on because I just find him very fascinating. And it's you can always learn something from him when you're
Yes.
listening, for sure. Okay, Zach. If somebody was going to go from the couch to moving on a daily basis, kind of like no foundation, no background with physical culture, what are 3 movements that you would encourage them to learn and implement immediately in their fitness journey, we'll call it?
Walking. And I would walk several times a day, 5-10 minutes at a clip, preferably 10 minutes, and preferably right after you have a meal. And that might be hard to do when you're at work, right? Oh, I just ate breakfast. I got to go to work. Oh, I want you to wake up 15, 20, 30 minutes earlier. During your lunchtime, don't sit and, don't go out to eat. Start packing your meals, chicken and rice, beef and rice. Once a week, maybe it's a grilled chicken salad. I pack my kids chicken and rice for lunch. I put it in a thermos. Go take a walk, even in the cold. It's very good. Then have a walk after dinner, and preferably a longer walk. So walking, number 1, it requires nothing. It's just simple to do. Number 2, squatting. You're kind of already squatting when you have to sit on and off a couch or sit on a toilet bowl. Well, do squats where you slowly get your butt to the couch and then stand up, and start doing that several times a day versus I'm going to work out for an hour. It's actually healthier to do kind of this micro dosing throughout the day. And then your third exercise, I love carrying things, a basic farmer's walk, but people may not have heavy dumbbells or heavy kettlebells or something that they could carry, but you should be carrying things because it's like an everyday, it's a ADL, activity of daily living. I'm working with a state trooper now who had a tough knee surgery. The physical therapy / rehab didn't go so well. Yesterday, we did a lot of carries, and I said, I just want you learning to get back to picking things up off the ground. Get those kettlebells. They're on the bottom shelf. Squat down and twist to pick them up, but learn how to get your body in a good position. Normally, we carry kettlebells. Yesterday, he carried thick-handled dumbbells. His one knee is not as good as the other knee, so he had to learn how to kind of lunge into the position. So when you do a farmer walk, every first rep is some sort of a squat, deadlift, hybrid movement. And carrying, when done with good posture, is full body. You could carry 2 different weights in each hand. You could carry 1 weight, which is great for stabilizing the trunk and good for back health and grip strength. The tricky thing again is, what if somebody has 0 background, they might just farmer walk, 15 to 20 pound dumbbells. And you can find that stuff very cheap now on Facebook. So some sort of a carry.
Okay. And then nutritionally speaking, if somebody's just kind of trying to get into it, what are the basics for nutrition that people should think about or implement, Zach?
I think when you're new, you want to stay away from the fad diet. And look, some of these fads are effective, meaning keto could be very effective. Intermittent fasting can be effective, but when you're new, they tend to be too extreme for you. And then you break down and you're like, I haven't eaten anything. I'm just going to eat these cookies before I heat up my chicken and rice. So have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe something lighter at night, or something like early afternoon where you're having these smaller type meals, and cook in quantity. So what I do is when I'm grilling chicken, I get those big Ziploc bags and I just put in balsamic vinaigrette or some light Italian dressing, and I make sure I've marinated the chicken for at least an hour, but preferably overnight. Then I grill a ton of chicken and I make white rice. I'll do ground beef, or the ground beef becomes burgers. And then salads are easy to make. Lettuce, tomato, cucumber, some olives. When you're trying to lean out, you got to stay away from processed fake foods. So listen, you got to get rid of the shit that's in the house, and your kids will learn to eat healthy. Like my son started that chicken and rice thing, like in the winter. He's like, Dad, can you not make me sandwiches? Can you just make me chicken and rice? I was like, well, Ethan, by the time you get to school, it'll be cold. He's like, so what? Then my wife's like, well, let's just get thermoses. All right. In the morning, I heat it up for a minute, put it in their thermos, and it's chicken and rice almost every day. Sometimes beef and rice, and you can't get bored of the basics: eggs, chicken, rice, beef. If you're gonna have pasta, gluten-free pasta, get some homemade sauce, and make it fun. Go and shop at, like, near me, we could go to Amish markets to get really healthy natural foods. I have to place an order for our ground beef. I go to a Mennonite farmer. I could see his cows, and then he rotates them, and there's cows further than your eyes could see, but they're free. They have all this room. They're not fat. They almost have like muscles to them. And get excited to eat healthy. And look, if there's crap food in the house, it's 99.9% guaranteed you'll eat at least some of it. That's why be careful with intermittent fasting and keto and this and that. That works well for the really extreme type person. Like right now, I've been going like 2 meals a day. So I'll have like a mid-afternoon meal and then a dinner meal. When I came home or here, I drank coffee. So in the morning I had tea, and then I just had a cup of coffee. I did have some trail mix, some mixed nuts, but I could do it. I'm a wrestler, so I'm used to like the not eating thing, and I'm trying to lean out a little bit. But if I do eat breakfast, it's eggs. And when I do buy eggs, the majority of the time, I go to, I'm in a beach town, but the neighboring town is actually a farm type town. And I buy the eggs off the side of the road from in front of somebody's house. I just put the money in their box. So make it like fun. So if you're dating somebody or married with somebody, have a date to the Amish market, have a date to the healthy supermarket. Figure out ways to, it's very conspiracy-ish, but I'm kind of very weary of the foods that we purchase from supermarkets with all the stuff they get injected with. So I try to minimize that. And healthy food is cheaper. Buying a bag of sweet potatoes or potatoes is cheap. So is rice. Chicken is cheap. Beef and eggs have gotten a bit expensive. But if you were to buy a fast food meal, you're looking at like $12. But I could buy 2 things of skinless, boneless chicken breast for $12, and that could last you probably 3 days versus 1 meal. So food for thought.
Okay, last question for you, Zach, and then I'll give you an opportunity to share anything in closing. What do you like to do for fun when you're not in the strength and conditioning and coaching and teaching realm and trying to figure out the next pivot? Do you have some things that you like to do just to kind of chill and relax a little bit, so to speak?
Oh, yeah. Anything outdoors, regardless of cold, hot. So I live near the beach, so I'm constantly riding bike. If we go to the beach, I haven't surfed this year or last year too much, but we have surfboards. Fishing, I love to go fishing, mountain biking. We go to Lake George every year. I rent a boat, take my kids fishing. I love the sun. So right now I'm in my office. I could be in my office for about 2 hours before I go nuts, and I'm out. So even when I'm training athletes, in the gym, we will be like, all right, we're going to the park across the street to do some sprints, play some ultimate football, and then come back. If I had my way, my gym would be like an outdoor gym. Yeah, outdoors. I love it. Fresh air to me is like magic healing. In fact, remember doing the podcast Spartan Up in the winter. I was in one of the cabins, and Marion, the producer, I was like, Marion, can we do one episode outside? And she said, your energy not that it was bad in the cabin, but she's like, it was infinitely greater out here. I said, if you don't mind, let's just film the rest of the episodes outside. And there's snow, it's snowing, but I just love it, man. Fresh air. I feel like a prisoner in a house.
You and me both, Zach. All right. We're gonna wrap it up right there. Before I do a quick outro and we let everybody get out of here today, anything that you want to share in closing, Zach? Any final thoughts? Any final words? Where can people connect with you? Where can people find the book? I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll do a quick outro and then we'll wrap it up from there. So, platform's yours, Zach.
Strong Life Podcast. I think a lot of people who are into strength training will like that. Iron Journeys, that's my new book, ironjourneys.com, or just look it up on Amazon. And if you're into the strength training, get on my newsletter, zachstrength.com, free training courses that you could legitimately put to use and get results from right away before you buy anything. And I'm all on social, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Z Evanesh, Zevenesh. I think if you just Google Zach Evanesh, you'll start coming across all that. I have thousands upon thousands of free videos, articles. So just kind of go down that rabbit hole. And, Quinton, thanks for having me and wanting to share anything I could share. I hope it inspires people.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you, Zach, for coming on and sharing your story. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Curious and Candid, I just want to say thank you so very much. I appreciate all of you. I value all of you. And if you guys want to connect with me, 2 places you can do that: Instagram, Curious and Candid Podcast, email curiousandcandidpodcast@gmail.com. One huge favor I'd ask of all of you, please subscribe to Curious and Candid on iTunes. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. And if you guys have any interest in holistic lifestyle coaching, you can visit my website, which is awakentrainingnutrition.com. We'll catch you guys next time on another episode of Curious and Candid.